Hello, my name is Richard Hale, and for 15 years I worked overtime shifts and skipped vacations just to save every dollar I could for my daughter Sophia's college fund. I thought I was building her future brick by brick until the day I logged in and saw the balance drain to zero. On May 12, 2024, my world shifted. The money I had fought so hard to protect was gone, stolen from under my nose. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story. On May 12, 2024, I logged into the college fund account, and the balance stared back at me, $0. For a moment, I thought my eyes had failed me, that maybe the screen glitched, or I had typed the wrong credentials. But refreshing the page only reinforced the brutal truth. 15 years of discipline, sacrifice, and careful planning had vanished overnight. The account that was meant to carry Sophia into her future was nothing but an empty shell. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the walls of my home office as the silence pressed down on me. My mind replayed the years I had put money aside, every overtime shift, every holiday where I skipped indulgences to keep the deposit steady. That fund was my promise to Sophia, that her education would never depend on loans, that she would walk into her future free of chains. Now the promise had been broken, and I had no idea how. I drove straight to the bank, hands gripping the steering wheel harder than I realized. Sophia sat quietly in the passenger seat, glancing at me with wide, worried eyes. She was supposed to be preparing for her finals, not caught in the wake of this disaster. "Dad," she whispered, "is everything okay?" I wanted the lie to protect her from the storm brewing inside me, but honesty came out instead. "We're going to the bank to figure it out. Don't worry, I'll handle it." Inside the bank, the sterile chill of air conditioning hit me as I walked up to the counter and asked for Mark. He had been the officer managing the account since its creation. Within minutes, he came out, a polite but uneasy expression on his face. "Richard, what's going on?" he asked. I handed him the printed screenshot from that morning, the stark zero glaring from the paper. "Tell me this is a mistake." Mark frowned and led us into his office. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he pulled up the account history. The silence stretched unbearably until he finally said, "There were 2 large withdrawals on May 10th and 11th. He turned the monitor slightly, and I saw the numbers drain away, transaction by transaction, until the balance reached nothing. My stomach dropped. "Who authorized this?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Mark clicked through another screen. It was signed under Sophia's name. Sophia gasped beside me. "What? I never touched that account. I didn't even know the login." Her voice cracked with panic, and I could feel her entire world tilting under the weight of betrayal she hadn't yet understood. I clenched my fists, leaning over Mark's desk. "Are you telling me someone forged her authorization?" He nodded grimly. "Yes. The system shows her signature, but it looks off. We can escalate this as fraud." The word fraud echoed in my head like a gunshot. Someone had deliberately stolen from us, using Sophia's name as a shield. My mind raced through possibilities. Who had access? Who would know the timing? Who had the audacity? The pattern of the withdrawals nagged at me. They weren't random. They had been timed carefully, right before tuition payments were due, as if the thief knew exactly how to inflict maximum damage. Mark pulled up the verification logs. The requests came from a device linked to a familiar address, he said cautiously, eyes flicking toward me as if measuring how much truth I could withstand. I forced the words out. "Whose address?" He hesitated. "It's tied to Ethan's profile." Ethan, my son, the one I had trusted to look out for his sister. the one I had tried to guide even when he resisted every lesson I offered. The realization hit me with the cold precision of a knife sliding between ribs. He hadn't just stolen money, he had gambled away his sister's future, hiding behind her name to shield himself. Sophia's breathing quickened. Ethan? No, Dad, he wouldn't. But I knew. The transactions, the forged documents, the calculated timing, it all carried his signature, even if the ink said otherwise. I rose slowly, gripping the edge of Mark's desk to steady myself. The rage was there, burning hot, but beneath it lay something sharper, clarity. Ethan thought he could bury his tracks under his sister's identity. He thought he could take what wasn't his without consequence, but he underestimated me. My son had gambled his sister's future, and I had the proof. When I confronted Ethan at dinner, he smirked and said, Dad, I invested that money. I'm going to triple it. The words rolled off his tongue with the arrogance of someone who believed he had mastered the world before ever facing its consequences. For a moment, the clatter of utensils stopped, and the silence around the table grew thick enough to cut. Sophia's fork trembled against her plate. Linda's eyes darted between us, searching for an angle that would keep the peace. I sat back in my chair, studying my son. He had chosen boldness over shame, spinning theft into a narrative of ambition. He didn't flinch when Sophia gasped, or when I stared at him with all the weight of betrayal pressing down. Instead, he leaned into his performance, as if this was his chance to prove that he knew better than the man who raised him. Triple it? Linda finally asked, her voice soft but tinged with hope. Ethan, are you saying you've invested it somewhere safe? Something that will actually grow for Sophia's future? Her tone was cautious but not condemning. She wanted to believe him. She wanted a solution that erased the sting of what he had done, without forcing us into open war at the dinner table. Ethan seized the opportunity. Exactly. I know what I'm doing. Dad just doesn't understand the markets anymore. He still thinks saving in a low-interest fund is smart. He chuckled, glancing at me with condescension. But I live in the real world. I know how money actually works. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. That money wasn't yours to gamble with. It was mine. My tuition, my future. Her voice cracked, and I could see the dreams she'd built crumbling one by one. Dreams she had trusted me to protect. Ethan didn't soften. He only waved his hand dismissively. Relax, Soph. When the returns hit, you'll thank me. College will be pocket change. Linda placed a hand on Ethan's arm, almost protectively. Maybe we should hear him out, Richard. He's trying to do something. Bold? Maybe it's not as reckless as it looks. The betrayal wasn't in her siding with Ethan. It was in how quickly she did it, how reflexively she tried to shield him rather than the daughter who had lost everything. I kept my face neutral, though the fire burned beneath my skin. Speaking now would accomplish nothing. Every word of accusation would only drive them closer together, turning this into a trial where I was the defendant. So I chose silence. Outwardly, I chewed my food, drank my water, as if nothing had fractured. Inwardly, I cataloged every slip in Ethan's story, every boastful phrase that betrayed his recklessness. Sophia turned to me, desperation etched into her face. Dad, you're not saying anything. Don't you see what he's done? I met her eyes, steady and calm, silently reassuring her that I did see, that I wasn't blind or indifferent. But my voice stayed measured. I see enough, I said, then returned my gaze to my plate. She looked confused, even hurt, but I couldn't show my hand yet. Ethan mistook my silence for defeat. He leaned forward, voice sharpening. Dad, your time is over. You're stuck in the past. You think discipline and savings matter in a world that moves faster than you can blink. But I know how to play this game. I know how to take risks and win. His smirk widened. "You had your chance. Now it's mine." The words cut through the room like glass shattering on tile. For Linda, it was a rallying cry. Her expression shifted, almost proud, as if her son had declared himself a man. For Sophia, it was a knife in the gut. She lowered her gaze, shoulders slumping, her appetite gone. For me, it was confirmation. Ethan wasn't merely reckless. He was convinced he had surpassed me, that he was untouchable. The dinner resumed in fragments, the clink of utensils against plates drowned by the weight of silence and division. Ethan carried on with casual confidence, describing vague investments that supposedly guaranteed high returns. Linda nodded along, her faith in him cushioning every absurd claim. Sophia barely touched her food, lost in silent grief. And I sat there, a lone figure at the table that had once united us, now split down the middle. Inside, though, I was not broken. I was calculating. Every time Ethan exaggerated, every time Linda defended him, I filed it away. He thought he had reduced me to irrelevance. He thought my silence meant surrender, but silence was my strategy. Later that night, after the dishes were cleared and the house fell into uneasy quiet, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The shadows stretched long, the clock ticking louder with every passing second. My phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen from Mark, the banker who had shown me the forged documents just days earlier. I found the withdrawal transactions connected to a casino. May 18. I drove to the edge of town, following the trail of withdrawals. The morning air was heavy with dust, and the closer I got to the neon skyline that marked the casino district, the more the unease in my gut hardened into certainty. Mark's message had not been a mistake. The money hadn't gone into stocks, bonds, or any kind of clever investment. It had been funneled into the most dangerous of all illusions, chance. I parked across the street from the casino, its blinking lights trying too hard to promise fortune while hiding the wreckage it left behind. Ethan's car was already there. I sat in the shadows, watching through the windshield until he appeared, striding through the glass doors with the confidence of a man who thought luck was on his side. My chest tightened. This wasn't a phase, a misunderstanding, or a youthful gamble. This was addiction disguised as ambition. Inside, I trailed him just far enough to keep out of sight. Ethan headed straight to the red felt tables, his hands already restless, eyes wide with hunger. Chips clinked, dice rolled. The air smelled of sweat and false hope. I watched him buy in, and in the first few rounds he actually won. Small amounts, enough to swell his chest and sharpen his grin. He looked like a conqueror, basking in attention from strangers who cheered every toss and flip. But victory in places like this was nothing more than bait. I knew it. I had lived long enough to recognize the trap. And when his winning streak faltered, when his stack of chips shrank and his jaw tightened, I saw the mask slip. He wasn't investing. He was chasing. I stepped back into the night before he noticed me, positioning myself outside a nearby bar where gamblers spilled out when the losses hit too hard. The neon buzzed overhead, painting everything in sickly red. My phone stayed ready, recording, as I caught Ethan stumbling out between rounds, high on adrenaline, pockets lighter than before. He barked at the bartender for a drink, slammed it back, and laughed like a man untouchable. That's when a stranger approached him. A broad-shouldered man with ink crawling up his neck, and eyes too calm for the chaos around him. I recognized the type instantly. Not a gambler, but a collector. He placed a heavy hand on Ethan's shoulder and leaned close. I edged nearer, straining to catch the words. 2 weeks, the man said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the noise. "Or you pay in blood." Ethan's laugh faltered. He tried to brush it off, but his eyes betrayed him. Panic flickered, quick and raw, before he covered it with another arrogant grin. He shoved the man's hand away, barking back something I couldn't hear. The man didn't flinch. He simply smiled, tapped 2 fingers against Ethan's chest, and walked away into the darkness. I hit record again, capturing the exchange as clearly as possible. My hands were steady, though my heart was not. This was no longer about tuition or a drained account. My son had entangled himself in debts that carried threats beyond financial ruin. Moments later, Ethan stormed back inside, desperate to win back what he had lost. I followed just far enough to hear his voice rise above the crowd. He slammed chips onto the table, veins standing out in his neck, and shouted, "This is real money, Dad, not your pathetic savings." The words were venomous, flung into the air without realizing I was there to hear them. The dealer's eyes flicked toward me, but Ethan never turned. He was too consumed, too blinded by his need to prove himself. I stepped back again, letting the roar of the casino drown out my thoughts. He was digging himself deeper with every hand, every reckless bet, every declaration of superiority. And I knew with chilling clarity that this would not end with empty pockets. The stakes had shifted. Ethan's choices had dragged danger to our doorstep. In the shadows outside, I stood still, the phone heavy in my hand. I replayed the video, watching the collector's warning again and again. Each time, the threat felt sharper. It wasn't just Ethan's future at risk. If he didn't pay, if the debt wasn't resolved, blood would spill, and not necessarily his alone. Silently, I saved the recording, the screen glowing against the night. My grip tightened around the device as I walked briskly to my car. It was no longer just about money. It was about survival. My family's safety was now on the line. I thought I had the upper hand until Ethan flipped the script. May 20th. The family gathered in our living room, the air buzzing with congratulations as Sophia clutched the envelope from her dream university. Relatives had brought flowers, cake, and warm embraces for her. I should have been basking in pride, watching my daughter step into her future. Instead, I stood on shaky ground, carrying the weight of a secret that burned inside me. Proof of Ethan's betrayal, tucked away in my phone, a video that could shatter the illusion he had built. But exposing him here, tonight, would scorch Sophia's moment. I wanted her to celebrate, not see her family torn apart in front of the people she loved. So I stayed silent, biding my time, believing I could wait for the right moment. I didn't realize Ethan had already chosen his stage. He rose from his chair with the casual grace of someone who had rehearsed every line. Glass in hand, he smiled at the circle of family members. His voice smooth, confident. "I just want to say," he began, "that Sophia deserves every ounce of this success, and Dad—" He paused, glancing at me with a smirk only I recognized. "Well, he's been intense about making sure she got here." A ripple of laughter passed around the table, but I heard the barbs hidden in his tone. Linda tilted her head, watching him curiously. Ethan pressed forward. "Sometimes, though, intensity crosses into obsession. Dad's always been controlling. About money, about decisions, about trusting us." His eyes swept across the room, gauging reactions, planting seeds. I felt heat rising in my chest. "Ethan," I warned, my voice low, but he ignored me. "He checks every account, every move," Ethan continued, his tone mournful now, feigning the role of wounded son. "I know he loves us, but he doesn't trust me. He never has. And that's hard, you know? To feel like you'll never be good enough for your own father." Linda's lips parted, a flicker of sympathy flashing in her eyes. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. My fists clenched under the table. He was turning the truth inside out, warping reality until I was the villain in the story. Sophia's gaze dropped to her lap, silent. She knew something was wrong, but fear kept her quiet. She had always been the peacekeeper, the one caught in the middle. My heart ached to see her trapped in this web. I stood, unable to let the lie breathe another second. "Enough," I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. "You want to talk about trust, Ethan? Let's talk about responsibility. About the money you drained from your sister's college fund. About the casino where you—" "Stop!" Ethan's voice boomed, sharper than mine, fueled by performance. He pointed at me, his face twisted in righteous indignation. "See, this is what I mean. He can't stop. He can't let me breathe. He's making things up now, trying to smear me in front of you all because he can't accept that I've grown up. He thinks I'm reckless. He thinks I'm weak. But the truth is—" He paused, his voice breaking just enough to feel real. "He's never trusted me. Not once. And that's why I've had to take responsibility for myself." Gasps, whispers, shaking heads. The tide was turning, not in my favor. Linda rose slowly, her hand trembling as she reached for Ethan's shoulder. "Richard," she said softly, almost pleading. "Please, not tonight. Can't you see how much this hurts him?" "Hurts him," I echoed, my throat tight. "What about Sophia? What about the future he's gambling away?" "Richard!" Linda snapped, her voice sharp enough to silence the room. She had never spoken to me like that in public before. The sting of it silenced me more effectively than any shout. All eyes were on me now, not with respect or understanding, but with judgment. I was the tyrant, the obsessed father, the man who couldn't let his children breathe. Ethan had cast the play, and I was trapped in the role he assigned. Climax hit like a hammer when Ethan, emboldened, jabbed a finger toward me. "You never trusted me. That's the real problem. That's why I've had to step up. That's why I've had to be the one to take risks. Because you'd rather keep us all chained to your fear." Applause didn't follow, but the silence was almost worse. The room hung heavy with sympathy for him, suspicion for me. My phone, heavy in my pocket, burned like a weapon I couldn't draw without turning Sophia's celebration into ashes. Finally, Linda's voice came again, brittle with strain. "Richard, please, leave. Let us finish this evening without more conflict." I looked at her, then at Sophia, who still couldn't meet my eyes. My chest felt hollow. Slowly I nodded. No words came. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. The night after I was asked to leave my own house, I cleared the table, laid out every document I had, and rebuilt the story from the ground up. Rage was a bad architect. Discipline wasn't. I diagrammed dates, locations, and actors like a quiet engineer drawing load paths in steel. The line pointed to one conclusion: I couldn't win this in the court of family opinion. I had to win it where facts don't plead. They prevail. On May 28, I sat across from Clara Evans, a litigator with a voice like a metronome and a talent for turning mess into evidence. Her office smelled faintly of paper and eucalyptus, an odd combination that somehow signaled clean work. I slid the folder across her desk. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She said, "Walk me through it in order," and I respected her immediately. I kept it to facts. 2 withdrawals on May 10th and 11th from the college fund, a forged authorization under Sophia's name, a contact number that died the moment the money moved, casino-linked transactions, a video outside a bar showing Ethan flush from a win, and another with a man who wasn't a gambler, promising consequences in 2 weeks. Clara listened, eyes steady, pencil still. When I finished, she tapped the eraser once. "Fraud is a ladder," she said. "We climb it one rung at a time. I need 4 things. First, bank statements and teller notes under subpoena if the bank drags its feet, though it sounds like your guy Mark will cooperate. Second, a formal handwriting analysis on the so-called authorization. Third, device and login logs tying the withdrawals to a specific phone or IP. Fourth, a clean chain of custody on your videos. No edits, original files, metadata intact." "I can get Mark," I said. "He's ready to help." "Good. We'll also request the branch security footage for the dates. If Ethan, or whoever, walked in with a forged ID, we want the stills." She glanced at the acceptance letter I'd brought for context. "What's your deadline with the bursar?" "August 1st, I said. "Deposit $25,000. Clara nodded once. "We won't wait for a trial to solve tuition." Separate tracks. On the evidence track, we build leverage. On the tuition track, we secure a bridge solution so Sophia isn't punished for her brother's choices. She looked up. "Where's Linda in all this?" "Standing with Ethan for now." "Then we make this impossible to deny." At the bank, Mark greeted us with the relief of a man who finally had permission to be useful. He had already printed the transaction history and flagged the cashier's instruments used to siphon the account. "Here are the teller logs," he said, sliding a stapled packet across. 2 different tellers, both noted an authorization form on file for Sophia Hale and a phone verification to a number ending in 93. He lowered his voice. "That's not any number we have for your family." Clara scanned quickly. "We'll need signed affidavits from both tellers, and Mark, a copy of any existing guardianship or co-owner language on the account, back when Sophia was a minor." Mark nodded. "There was routine co-guardian boilerplate years ago. It's here, but any update should have required in-person verification." "Which means somebody cut corners," Clara said. "Get me the internal policy memo that covers that requirement. We'll need to show deviation from standard practice." We stepped into a side office for privacy, while Mark pulled the archived camera logs. Sophia had been waiting on the bench outside, hands folded over a folder I recognized from our kitchen, her admissions packet, the one she'd been too afraid to display after the dinner that turned on me. She stood when she saw us, chin lifted like she was bracing for weather. "I brought the enrollment letter," she said to Clara before I could speak. "It shows the deposit schedule, and—" she took a breath and passed over a printout. "I found this in my email security log. On May 11th, an OTP request for the college fund profile was sent to Mom's old phone number, the one she stopped using last year. I never saw it." Her eyes flicked to me. "The recovery contact must have been switched to that number without us noticing." Clara's eyebrows rose a millimeter. "Good eye." She circled the timestamp with her pen. "We'll pair this with the IP logs from the portal. If the login came from a device tied to Ethan, or a SIM registered to him, we close another loop." Mark returned with a thumb drive and a paper envelope. "Security gave me the branch stills for the 10th and 11th. Same man both days, baseball cap, mask under his chin for the first teller, fully on for the second. He slides an authorization form across the counter. The teller scans it and types. Timecodes match the withdrawals." Clara didn't touch the envelope. "We'll log these into evidence at my office. Chain of custody starts now." She turned to me. "Your videos from outside the bar. Originals?" "Untouched," I said. "Metadata intact." "Good. We'll have our analyst image your phone and preserve the files. Also, I want a certified document examiner on this signature." She tapped the photocopy of Sophia's authorization. "If she lifts her pen on the S, and this one doesn't?" That's the kind of detail jurors remember. and mediator's respect. For the rest of the afternoon, we worked like a small, quiet machine. Mark assembled affidavits and policy memos. Clara drafted notices and a demand letter that read like a scalpel, precise, sterile, and built to cut. It gave Ethan a chance to make restitution without public exposure, then outline the consequences if he didn't. Civil claims, fraud referrals, and an emergency motion to freeze any accounts he could still touch. When we broke, Clara looked at me over the top of the folder. 2 tracks, remember? Leverage and tuition. I'm arranging a meeting with a credit union to secure a short-term bridge loan against your retirement instruments. Painful, but controlled. We keep Sophia on schedule no matter what Ethan does. Sophia's eyes shone, but she kept her voice steady. I'll take more scholarship meetings. I can tighten costs. You'll take the meal plan, I said gently, and she smiled through it. A small victory that felt like sunlight. Back at Clara's office, an analyst had already pulled the phone image. He projected a report, geolocation tags from the bar videos, creation timestamps, device ID. The chain held. She called her preferred document examiner, booked a rush analysis, then penned a final line on the cover memo that gathered everything we'd assembled into a single spine. This case now tells itself, she said, stacking the pages in order. Account history, teller notes, policy deviation, authorization scan, handwriting opinion, pending, security stills, device logs, OTP records, bar videos, and the collector's threat. The pile looked heavier than paper. It looked like consequence. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. The humiliation of May 20th hadn't disappeared, but it had been converted into motion, into angles and levers and force. Ethan could posture in front of relatives, in front of facts. He would have to stand still. Clara capped her pen and slid the finished packet into a red well. June 5th, the mediation. That's where we bury him. The conference room was silent when I placed the thick file of evidence on the polished oak table. Papers slid against one another like steel plates locking into place. For 3 weeks, I had been preparing for this morning, June 5th, and now the entire weight of those nights pressed down in front of us. Across the table, Ethan leaned back in his chair, wearing the same smirk he had at the dinner table. Linda sat beside him, stiff and unsure, eyes darting from me to the mediator. Sophia squeezed my hand under the table, a silent reminder of why we were here. Clara sat to my right, posture exact, pen already uncapped like a blade waiting to cut. The mediator, a gray-haired man with a soft voice, cleared his throat. We're here to resolve a family dispute concerning misappropriated college funds. Let's proceed. Mr. Hale, you may begin. I didn't speak first. Clara did. We will present evidence in sequential order. Mr. Hale's son, Ethan Hale, unlawfully accessed his sister Sophia's college account and diverted the funds to gambling activity. We'll demonstrate this with bank statements, teller affidavits, security footage, and device logs. She nodded at me, and I slid the first exhibit forward, the bank statements. On May 10th and 11th, I said evenly, 2 withdrawals emptied the account. Not by Sophia, not by me, by someone using a forged authorization under Sophia's name. Mark, who had been brought in as a witness, handed the mediator a folder of teller notes. Both tellers recall the authorization form, he explained. They verified it against policy, but the contact number listed was invalid. I can confirm this number never belonged to the Hale family. The mediator nodded, scribbling notes. Ethan shifted in his seat. This is ridiculous. Dad's paranoid. He never trusted me. Clara raised a hand. We'll get to that. She opened the next folder. Inside were photographs, stills from the bank's cameras. A man in a cap, mask lowered in one frame, raised in another. Enough of the jawline, the eyes, to make him recognizable. Linda leaned forward, her lips parted, then pressed shut. "This proves nothing," Ethan barked. "Lots of people look like me. That isn't—" I cut him off, laying the next piece down, the forensic handwriting report. "This is the so-called authorization with Sophia's name. And this," I slid the comparison sheet beside it, "is her real signature. A state-certified document examiner concluded with 98% certainty that the authorization was forged by a different hand. Yours." Ethan's face flushed red. "You can't know that." Clara didn't flinch. She tapped her pen once. "We also have device logs. The withdrawals were made from a phone registered under your name, Ethan. IP address, SIM registration, geolocation, everything ties to your device." Sophia whispered, almost inaudible. "Why would you do this to me?" Ethan turned to her. "I was going to triple it. You don't understand. Dad's been hoarding money, saving pennies like some miser. I was trying to gamble your sister's future," I said quietly. The mediator raised his eyebrows. "Do you have any additional exhibits?" Clara smiled faintly, the smile of someone who knows the final blow is coming. "Yes, a recording." She pressed play on a small device. Ethan's voice filled the room, taken from outside the casino bar. "This is real money, Dad, not that pathetic little savings fund of yours." And then later, his drunken brag to a creditor. "I'll cover it. My old man will fold like he always does." The room went still. Linda's hand dropped from Ethan's arm. You lied to me," she whispered. "You let me defend you. You made me believe your father was the one destroying this family." For the first time, Ethan had no words. He stared at the table, knuckles white, the smirk gone. The mediator straightened his papers. "Mr. Ethan Hale, based on the evidence and your own recorded statements, it is clear you accessed and misappropriated the funds. My recommendation, to be formalized in writing, is as follows. You will sign a binding agreement to repay the full amount, with interest, under legal supervision. You will also forfeit all access rights to any remaining family accounts." Ethan muttered something under his breath, but Clara cut across him. "Refusal means immediate escalation to criminal court. Fraud and identity theft carry sentences longer than gambling debts." The mediator set the pen before Ethan. "Sign." His hand trembled, but he wrote his name. Each stroke sounded like a nail hammered into wood. Sophia broke into tears, not of despair, but of release. She buried her face against my shoulder, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift. Linda looked at me then, not with doubt, not with contempt, but with something that almost resembled regret. She turned to Sophia, brushing her daughter's hair back gently. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Clara gathered the signed document, slid it into the Redwell, and capped her pen. "It's done." When we left the conference room, the morning light was waiting, clean and sharp. Sophia's path to college was safe. My name, once dragged through the mud, had been restored, and Ethan, well, he had buried himself. I tightened my arm around Sophia and spoke the vow aloud, not just to her, but to myself, to Linda, to the world that had watched us fracture. No one will ever gamble with my family's future again. I walked out of that room with Sophia by my side, and for the first time in weeks, the weight on my chest was gone. Justice hadn't come easily. It never does. But the truth had cut through every lie Ethan built. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that family doesn't mean blind loyalty. It means protecting the ones who truly deserve it. And perhaps by standing firm today, I've made sure no one will ever gamble with our future again.